Good evening, and welcome to the Board of Selectmen meeting on this Thursday, December 1st, 2016. We're good? Okay.
Right here? Is that what you want?
Tonight's proposed agenda is we will open up with the pledge, and we will get right into an information session with the Board of Assessors and Mr. Venuti to review various policy options for allocating the FY 2017 local property tax levy among the 5 property tax classes, which are residential, open space, commercial, industrial, and personal. And then we'll allow for some public comment, and we will adjourn. So, Mr. Clerk, if you'd lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Sticks there. All right, so the agenda is a single item, and I think we'll just turn it right over to Mr. Venuti.
Yeah, we might want to mention that this is something new for the board, that when you had scheduled the annual tax rate classification hearing, which this year will be this coming Monday night, November 5th at 7:15, it was felt that it would be important to have a preview session, a public information session, so that hearing, when you have to make a decision in order to get tax rate set and tax bills out on time, rather than that be the first opportunity that the public has had to see and digest the options that you'll be considering, you wanted to schedule this public information session for the benefit of the public for the first time. I want to thank, and did you know that we had a PR department in George Sanders, who did a yeoman's job putting up signs all around town telling people about these 2 events. So
That was you, George.
it was George. Very good. So here we are, and it's a presentation from Steve Venuti, and you also have in your packets the information that the assessors have put together as a backup.
Thank you, Mr. Bergman. Mr. Venuti.
Thank you. I'll start off like we did last year when we had this informal working session. Again, this is informal, this is your working session. Interrupt with questions if I talk about something that doesn't ring a bell or is foreign, or because you only look at this once a year. So let's start off. When we talk about taxes, we don't have very much good news because taxes generally go up, but we do have some good news this year, and we'll start right off with it. We know that we had extra new growth this year, that $1.9 million. It was more than what we expected. Our budgets weren't based on that. So we were able to take $298,000 of that extra new growth money and apply it to the debt exclusions, which are outside the levy. So that $1.5 million that you see would have been $1.8 million. So that decrease is going to save the taxpayer 17 cents on a single rate. So that's a big.
Take up your offer to interrupt. These are debt exclusions that have already been voted, correct?
Debt exclusions already voted. Right. So this is middle school, police station, and so on.
It's current existing debt.
Yep. Existing debt. So there's nothing new. So this is saving the taxpayer 17 cents on this year's bill, which is big. In conjunction with that, we take it to the next step. We can keep these savings going over the next 3 years after this year by using the $532,000 at town meeting appropriated into the exclusion stabilization fund. So we can bring this year's next year's level down to that same $1.5 million and keep that all the way out to FY21. So the brownish orange is orangey color that you see is what the debt exclusion would be, and the blue is what we're going to make it over the next 4 years. So you can see we're saving 17 cents this year, projected at 13 cents next year, 10 cents the year after, and 7 cents after that. So it's continued savings. There's no spikes in the tax rate. So this is very good news for the taxpayer. The other thing that we should keep in mind when we go through the budget process this year is if there's extra money left over through the capital planning process, besides the capital stabilization fund, we should still be funding this debt exclusion account, because now we can target FY22 and make 18 through 21 the same as 22 would be. And I think we only need like $200,000 in that account to do that. So that's another positive. We keep this going and just keep targeting numbers and years into the future until it runs off somewhere in 35 or so. Yeah. So it's very good news. But unfortunately, we're here to talk taxes, and taxes go up. FY17 is a non-reval year. Total values increased by a little over 5%. We had a decrease in existing values of 31 basis points. That's because of the depreciation on personal property. So there was no valuation change on existing businesses or houses this year. New growth increased by 5.38% on that total value. So those two netted together come to the 507. Next valuation is in FY21, changes to every 5 years with the Municipal Modernization Act. Yes.
That 5.38%, that's a little bit higher than the norm over the past few years, is it, or is it not?
No, that is a lot higher.
Yeah, a lot higher,
Yeah,
okay.
I have a graph a little
Okay, you
further
get
down,
that.
we can see that. Overall property values, well, we crossed the $1.7 billion mark in town, $1,707,000,000 in total value. And you can see the blue line is, the blue bars are residential values, commercial and personal property, the smaller ones. And this is in dollars, so you can see it's dramatic on the residential side, that increase. But percentage-wise, of the total, it's actually going down. We'll see that in the next slide. As a percentage of total value, residential is now 77.98%, and commercial and personal property is combined 22% or so. Total property values, that 5% equates to $82 million in total value. And the residential piece of that pie was 61% of it, or $50 million. So because residential was only 61% of this year's increase, the percentage of residential to total goes down. It was 78.8 last year. It's now 77.98%. So it peaked in 2015 at 79.68. And then the points started to come on, those values. So commercial became a little bit greater. The last time we were under 78% was in 2003. So it's been a while. Breaking down the property value changes between the two categories, existing values, as I mentioned, went down this year because of depreciation on personal property, and new growth was $87 million, $87.4 million, and that was the 5.38%. Reval year was in FY16. You can see the existing valuations went up that year to the reval, and we still had strong new growth, but not as strong as this year was. The reval before that was in FY13. You can see that was right at the end of the recession that we had. That was the first valuation through that process, and we lost quite a bit on the house values at that point in time. Breaking down new growth, one of the reasons that new growth was understated this year is this time last year, we made projections through the assessors what new growth would be based on permits that are taken out and plans that we're giving. Residential was estimated at 25.7 million. We actually came in at 44.6. Commercial at 24.2 came in at 42.6. So huge changes in new growth for this year. And that equated to that $1.9 million in new growth that we saw. Average single-family home, the value increased up to $401,000 from $395,000. That's a 1.5% increase. But remember I said that existing values didn't change. So that increase in average value is because of all the new homes that have been built. $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 homes brings up the average over time. Okay, so this isn't because of existing values. This is new stuff coming on. So we'll see this trend over the next couple of years as the assessors project what's coming on for new growth on the residential side. We'll see later on. So this number will increase. The high point previously was FY07 at 415. The low point was the last reval before the 2 revals ago in FY13 at 366. So during the recession, we lost 12% on value, of almost $50,000 per house. We've regained it, some of it, almost 10%, to get up to that 401. So we would gain $35,000 of that value that we lost. And again, it's projected to continue to increase over that 401. Commercial property, the assessors like to look at a typical small business in town. So when we take the values of the commercial property, we eliminate anything greater than $2 million or less than $50,000. So this is what they consider a typical small business. That's increased to $541,000, up from $528,000. To give you an example of the typical business that they're looking on, Sherry Gould's office building is right at that level. So that's like a typical building that we've been looking at. Starting to break down and look at how we come up with the taxes and what you'll be looking at. We start off with, again, property values and divide it up between the residential and the commercial piece of the pie. So you can see out of that $1.7 billion, $1.3 billion is residential, $376 is commercial, 77.98% and 22% total for the two categories. If we were a single rate community, your jobs would be a lot easier. Single rate would be $20.40. Residents would be responsible for 77.98% of the total levy, and commercial at 22% of the total levy. Total levy this year, as we saw, was $34 million. But we're not a single rate community.
Why even say it?
Because that's the basis of how everything else is calculated. You have to start with that piece of the pie. You're allowed to shift some of the residential burden onto the commercial piece of the pie. But there's limitations. In most years, you can't do more than 50%, add 50% of the commercial tax burden back onto them. So for example, if the burden was $6 million, you could only shift $3 million over, which is 50% of the 6 for a total of 9. Okay? So let's talk about a shift. So here's an example. I used your shift from last year, which was 11.03%. That was what was voted. If we use that same shift this year, the 27 million piece of the pie that the residents would be responsible for goes down to 24 million. So that 3 million, that gray piece, would shift over to the commercial side. So the residents would now be responsible for 69.38% of the levy, and the commercial piece would be 30.62%. So we're moving 11% of the blue over to the orange. And that piece, that 11%, is 8% of the total levy. Okay? So this is the resulting piece. Again, residents would be responsible for 69.38% and commercial 30.62%. So there's some pieces that on the option sheet, you'll see these headers on each of the options. The shift in this example is 11.03. So we took 11.03% of the resident burden and shifted it to the commercial. CIP factor comes out to 1.39%. So the $7 million that was there, $7 million and change, was increased by 39% up to the 10.6 million. And the residential factor at 88.97 means that the blue piece is 88.97% of what it was. All right? Historically, this is what we've done. If you look at the blue line, for example, we'll start off with that. That's the residential percentage of total value. Again, it peaked in FY15, and it's down to 77.98% in 17. So it went up over the past years, and past 2 years it's come down. If you look at the line right above it, that residential shift, again, it's mostly following the blue line. It went up, and it's past 2 years it's been coming down. The little aberration there, that FY14 is when that board actually did a 1.47% CIP factor. So it shifted a lot more of the burden onto the commercial folk. The bottom line is the residential share of the levy. So it was pretty flat. In FY14, with that larger shift, it went down to 69.26%. And then with smaller shifts the past 2 years, it went up over the 70% level. If you remember the example that we just went through, if the shift was the same, that 11.03% that you did last year, the residential burden would be, I think it was 69.36%. So it would fall back under that 70% level. You could logically infer that if the residential piece of that pie is getting smaller, then should we be shifting more than what you did last year onto the commercial base? But that's what you get paid the big bucks for. Historically, for CIP factors, as you can see, there's been no rhyme or reason as to what's been chosen over the years. The high was in 2007 at 1.5, and as I mentioned in 14, we went up to 1.47. That was the highest in recent years. The average over these 16 years is 140, almost 142, and last year we were at 141. Estimates for the future, because again, this should give you extra information to help you make your decision for this year. The assessors do not see any interim valuation changes, so the negatives that you see in blue for valuation is again depreciation on personal property, and the orange is new growth. You can see it probably averages around 30 million over the next 2 years, and then drops to 20 million in FY20. The makeup of that new growth, as you can see, residential is strong, continues strong over the next 3 years. Commercial Takes a little break in FY '18, because the next few buildings at the point won't be ready, because value is set January 1st of each year. So FY '19, you get some of the extra buildings on the point, like the movie theater, for example, would be in '19. In '20, all the buildings there are done, so commercials goes way down, almost to nothing. Residential stays strong. You could possibly make the case, based on the list that the assessors gave, that residential is very conservative in that year. So there could be a little blip in residential that year also, going up further than that.
Is the Patriot Beverage factored in here?
Patriot Beverage wouldn't be new growth. That's the best kind of growth we can have. That's existing value. So that's going to spread their tax burden, take it away from residents and give it to the commercial base. But this is just new growth.
What's the next reval year, Steve? When does that first appear in here, and is that?
21 is.
It's 21, so
Yeah.
okay. So we're not sure if we're in it all.
So based on these estimates from the assessors, you can see in the bottom, right at the bottom, the residential value continues to go down from 77.98 this year down to 77.36, and graphically, that's how it shows. Any questions? Done.
Never gets easier.
No, it's tough to look at this stuff once a year, so.
Nice. And you think you have it figured out,
You don't.
nice. Anybody have any questions for Mr. Venuti?
Not a question for Steve, but I'm wondering, some of the options, are they not, we don't have that yet, or?
Nope, that's in the packet, I think it's page 8.
Okay, I just
Can
wrote
we
that
put
down.
those up?
Of the assessors.
Can we put those up on the screen?
Okay, I see it, yep.
So that wasn't part of the,
Yeah, but that's gonna be the next thing we
They're in
deal
your
with.
pack,
then.
yeah, they're in your
original-
packet,
original
and we
packets,
can
yeah.
put them up, because it's usually the thing we focus on
Right.
during the hearing
Just,
itself.
just as a side note to this, if you throw out the single rate and the max shift factors of these examples,
Yep.
the total dollar difference to the average household, going from the lowest to the extreme, just on these examples, is $169. So as you get to the differences, you may only be talking about $7 or $8
Right.
a quarter or a month to the average home, so that a lot of these numbers, as you argue over them, aren't significant amongst themselves.
The only thing that you want to just keep in mind is, at some point, and we saw that in FY '20, where commercial growth just basically stops, which means after that point in time, residents' piece of that pie is going to get bigger. So if the shift starts to move away from that line, like we saw in that graph, in this interim period, then the adjustment that needs to be made is going to be worse for the residential taxpayer at that point in time, because we'll run out of room to go up at that point.
That's only if we continue to shift more to,
Yes.
no, to no, commercial. Commercial.
yeah, so if we're taking, I see what you're saying, so if we're taking more of the burden
We say
while
stay
there's growth
stagnant
with.
as is, then you're gonna see a less impact in '20. The more we shift towards commercial, if we decide to shift, because it's good years with growth, if we decide to shift more towards commercial, at the end, we're gonna have to
We're not gonna have that 50% buffer.
have a bigger
Run out
impact.
of, you run out of space,
Run out of
you can
room.
only go up to that 50%.
Right.
So you want to stay away from that.
But is it correct, if I heard you, or if I understood what you were saying earlier, that because of the changes in growth projections, that if, for instance, if we had stayed with the rates that were adopted last year, just because of the changes in growth, that would effectively be a minor benefit to the residential class? Is that right? Just because of the changes in the valuation between residential and...
If we stayed at that 1103 that I showed,
Yeah.
which one?
That drops it under the 70%.
Yeah, it brings it to
Right.
6936.
And that, so that, not to be hung up on just, status quo, but status quo actually reflects a slight savings for residents without changing or increasing the rate on the commercial.
Without increasing the burden on commercial, more than what it was, yes.
Right. But at least in the rate anyway, yeah. Okay.
And I think the beginning two slides are very important in regards to tax rate, no matter what we do. To keep that consistent, to give the residents and the businesses in town a tax break, that's the best way to do it,
Absolutely.
And I think, moving forward, as you stated too, is to get those stabilization funds back in. But we also had a selectman up here at one time that said, if we collect 2.5% increase every year, why not take 2% or 2.25% towards the budget and take that other 0.25% and pay down debt exclusions? So, that's a discussion I think we should have and continue to have, because we're seeing the benefit without doing that, just by shifting the extra cash that we have. And if we can make that 17 cents, 20 cents, even better, But that discussion has to start now for fiscal year 19, not for fiscal year 18. So we can have a good, open dialogue in regards to, A, is that something the board wants to do? B, what's the impact going to be on town side budgets and the school budgets, because there's got to be a full buy-in for everybody, and move forward with that suggestion that Mr. Avella had when he was on the board.
This was a very effective way to manage the additional new growth funds, because our budgets are set. The revenue will be collected. This is just, we have the option to raise the taxes for the excluded debt. We're not exercising that option fully. We're still in balance.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
It's a great way to apply it.
Absolutely.
And to be able to carry it out for the next 4 years.
Right.
It's fantastic. But beyond that even, or add to it by, making a financial decision that is going to help the taxpayers, may have a small impact on our budgets, but not a huge impact.
Yeah, it's our goal to continue this, be able to give you these options going forward. It's just, we want to be able to stabilize it as much as we can. So even if the town decided not to fund the debt exclusion stabilization account anymore, we can maintain this debt level for the next few years.
The goal is not to
Right.
get any spikes.
Right.
That's what you want to avoid.
And then when a decision is made for another project, senior center, senior housing, and the town says, hey, we want to do a debt exclusion, or inside the levy, or whatever it is, we'll have some type of mechanism to offset anyways. And we'll have experience with the offset of what we're doing now, so I think it's a good move.
Any debt we eliminate allows us,
Absolutely.
the capacity to incur debt later on, if we want to. But if I might just add, I'm very happy with this presentation and the information provided tonight. I had requested that we have this be a two-stage process, and it was just a direct reflection of some of the feedback I got last spring from folks that, it's no reflection on the current board, it was going on 20 years ago when I was last here, that we have the hearing all of a sudden one night, and then all the information's on the table, and it's voted that night. And I know we have to set our tax rate, so at least by having this two-stage process, we have a few days to chew over the information, and so does the public, and they have a chance to impact us with their input. The only thing I would ask, and this is, I was admittedly a little late in the game in making that request, but perhaps in our future planning, if there's at least a week rather than a day that we can get this information, and so does the public, then there's, more of a chance for people to, to absorb it and digest it.
I was talking with
yeah.
Mr. Bergman earlier, and I said, we do
Yeah,
this
if we
with the
ever
transfer
don't have
station. We should do
a
this
special
with the
town
transfer
meeting in
Right.
the middle of
Look,
November.
I'm not blaming anyone. I mean, all the factors pushed
If we
us.
did it in late October,
Right.
we could have 2 weeks between
Yeah.
the time, because it's ironic that when we adopt a policy that.
It's a month.
You do it, you introduce it at one meeting, you adopt it at the next, and
Right.
that could be, a big or a little policy, but.
And
it's
this
something
is arguably a
that's-
lot more significant.
This impacts the vote.
I compare this to the transfer station hearing. We do this in the summer. You have the transfer station information night, and then
Right.
you have the hearing 2
Yep.
weeks later.
Yeah,
So
when
this
we,
is a
when we
bigger-
present
We,
recommendations.
we
it's
need,
full
we
2
need that
weeks.
same schedule for private roads. We're always making
Yeah.
decisions right before winter about private roads. We gotta do that in the summer. Jim makes his recommendations, and we tell the folks, here's what we want fixed before
I think
November,
the,
instead of.
The detail and the clarity of the information we got here is terrific, and just, if we're going in the future, if we can just kind of make our own schedules accommodate doing that a little bit earlier, so everybody has the information, then, that's not a criticism. As I say, I didn't float this until a couple of weeks ago, and I knew we were under the gun for our December 5th meeting. But that being said, we're in a position where people can ask some questions tonight, and we're not under the gun to make a decision tonight. We have till Monday to do that.
I think the thing that the public tends to be most interested about, though, is the
This.
set of
Yes,
options that's
right.
up there. And
And the
so it
impact,
might be worth going through and just highlighting what the nature of some of the options are that the board will need to choose from on Monday night, so that those are out there.
And here's all the real options, so, this is, what you're seeing
Right.
is a small selection,
Subset.
a subset of many options that the board has.
And even, I would venture that that's not complete either, because we can do anything, it's infinity in between, correct? Right.
Infinite combination.
Yeah, so, just so folks know, these are
Not
just.
advocating infinity, just
No, no,
pointing it
no,
out.
no, no.
What I would request of the board is if there's an option that is not on this sheet that you would like to see, if you could let me know, because what I do before your hearing is figure out the excess levy capacity for each option.
Right.
So if you pick something that's not on here, I have to run upstairs.
Right, because we have to vote a specific actual.
And we should mention, all of the information that's been presented here is on the town's website. You can link it, if you go to the homepage and just follow either the notice of tonight's public information session or Monday night's classification hearing, that there are links there to Steve's PowerPoint presentation and to the assessor's volume of backup materials and options.
And this particular slide that we have up there right now is page 8 in that package. And I think it's important to note that kind of the baseline, where everything else is compared, is number 5 in this chart. So if you are looking at it, number 5, which is the last residential shift, is what the other proposals are compared to.
And that is the format that we've been using for
Right.
years. So many of these options, it has been predetermined by the board that they want to see. There have been other options added that I'll kind of walk you through, that we try and space in between, because, you don't want to have everything at like 141, 141.1.
Right.
We want to give you something to compare it to. So just walking through it, the first option is the single rate. And again, we start with a single rate because that's what everything is based on. Again, the single rate is estimated at $20.40. The shift is 0, the residential factor is 1. So that's just, everybody pays equal portions. Number 2 is the last residential levy percent, which was that 0.899 that Steve had referenced earlier. So you can see that the residential rate on that would be $18.34. The commercial is estimated at $27.69. The dollar changes are also listed, and the percentage changes. Equal dollar is just applying the tax increase equally to each class, so residential to commercial. So you can't get it quite perfect, but the residential bill you can see would go up about $334. The commercial industrial class would go up $331. The rate would be $18.26 and $27.97. CIP factor C, number 4, that's one of the ones we just wanted to kind of get in there because you were looking at, 137, 135 before that. This would be 138. It's just another data point. At that, the residential bill would go up $314. The commercial would go up $428. The rate would be $18.21 and $28.15. Number 5, which is what we always refer to, is the last residential shift. That was that 11.03 that Steve had referenced in the slides. The factor was 0.8897. So the dollar change on that would be $290 to the residential class and $547 to the commercial. It's actually pretty close on the percentages too. It's 4.14 on the residential and 3.69 on the commercial. Again, 18.15 on the rate and 28.37 on the rate. Equal percent, not much different than the one above, but would make each class increase by 4.02%. Dollar change on the resident would be $282 and $596 on the commercial, $18.13 and $28.46. And then we added, some items. You can see 7, 8, and 9. We used the CIP factor of 141, 142, and 143 to just kind of give you, again, some data points on what that would look like. And then on number 10 is the maximum shift. So this is the one we get very nervous about in finance. But so the maximum shift, just to go through that, would change the residential bill by $37 and the commercial bill by $17.60.
Can you show that on the screen? We only get that number.
So I'm trying to see.
Yeah, it's,
Thank you.
and again, this is 1752 for the rate on residential and 3061 on commercial. About a 0.5% change on the residential and about 11.88 on the commercial percentage increase. So that's your maximum. So somewhere between that, if there are other options that you'd like to see, we can prepare that for Monday. I can get the information together.
Thanks, Bonnie.
No problem.
All right. Any other comments or questions?
Nope, you're good.
Just love to get any public input if there is any.
Anybody wish to be heard?
Not heard, but may I ask a question?
Please identify yourself, sir.
Paul Lavella, 95 Dressing Mill Road. As Selectman Glavy so astutely pointed out, there's various and sundry possibilities that you have present. And certainly the finance department's narrowed it down to 10, and any others that you may have based on historical precedents. But perhaps if the board articulated the psychological, the physiological underpinnings, philosophical underpinnings, that's why we would have a split rate in town, it might be useful to help us decide which direction we'd like to go, whether it's more towards an equalization or a furthering of the current split. Realizing we've only had it split in this town for 27 years now, 1989 being the first year we did that. Maybe your first year? The first time?
Yeah.
And it was a very narrow difference in those days. And while all the charts show some squiggly, the thing is the trend is this way. There's been a widening split in the two rates. So perhaps if, as I asked, the philosophical underpinning as to why we think we should have a split rate in the first place, and that may well help drive decisions as to which direction to go.
I would love to hear that too.
Well,
Discussion.
I can speak to the historical impetus, and that was quite simply to give relief to residences, because there's very little else we do in the tax, can do in the tax code or regulatory code, give relief to residences, and, so that was the logic, at least, several boards ago toward adopting it. I think once you get it in place, there's a norm established, and for many years, what's that?
It's all relative.
Yeah, it's all relative to the prior year's, established rates. So, you can look at it as 30 years of individual votes, which it is, but once a baseline is established, then it's an annual decision which direction you want to go in, or a long-term plan, affirmed, reaffirmed change. I would say, even though, it's interesting, the chart that Steve put up there with the up and down, which belies, a lack of, policy or consistency. I think what was really happening there a lot was boards attempting to have a stable rate on, as I recall it anyways, or a stabilization of the increase in the average bill, while valuations were going up and down, and as a result, you can have wide variations in that graph on page whatever it was there. Here it is. This slide here, it looks like there's no rhyme or reason to it, but there was actually a countervailing attempt to maintain normality during all that time period. Fred might be able to speak to that. He's been around like the beginning of time as I have.
Thanks, Paul.
A lot of boards were not looking to achieve any great change once the initial shift was enacted. So, is it appropriate to revisit it every year? Sure. But, I think what has consistently been the case was achieve a savings for residents and then maintain that. And then in recent years, as the change actually the board members would be better able to speak to it tonight, but my observation on the Finance Committee of the citizens has been that, we've got so close to the higher end just by the change in valuations that the commercial industrial sector, we've been so close to the top end that we needed to back off in that. And then it was spoken at a number of occasions that it should be used as a policy device to encourage economic development too. But that's probably something that more recent members of the board could speak to than I could.
Can I ask you, Paul, way back when the choice was made to go with the split rate, what was the split way back then? Because I think when you initiated it, it was to give a small break, not to go up to the 1.47 or anything.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact numbers, but my
Page 5 of
Yeah,
it's
here, yeah.
I tried to put it up, but it won't.
It's not rotating.
Rotate.
But I would say this without without having benefit of the exact numbers, that the change in valuations exacerbated that without any direct action on the board's part. Our percentage of the pie that was commercial versus residential had changed so much that without doing anything proactively, the burden shared by the commercial was just going up, up, up.
Well, the commercial class went from 60, where the residential went from 61 to 83% in, 15 years? And
Right.
it just kept climbing.
Yep.
So you were sort of everybody kept trying to stay even with that.
Right.
And keep things the same, and as a result, the shift just kept getting more every year.
Right.
I think it's important to point out to people too, that we did hit that 83%, and since then, it's come down so that on the commercial side, has been taking more of that burden off the residents.
May I offer that I think your first sentence nailed it, when you said you just want to reduce the burden on the residents.
Well, that was the initial impulse, sure.
Yeah, certainly another way to phrase that, you wanted to reduce the burden on the voters, is what I may offer.
So-
They're not purely synonymous. Actually, I think it's more the latter than the former, because we wanted to spread that out and increase the CIP. And the question was asked, and maybe it's worth at least announcing what it was. In '88, it was $15.84 across the board for the two different rates. Then the following year, it went to $10.03 to $12.10, so roughly a $2 difference in the spread. And then we've seen now, this past year, we're at $18, and almost $30. So that spread has just done this over those years. And even in the intervening years where the residential rates began to decrease from that 83% of the total valuation of the town, we still saw an increase over the years. In the two previous boards, the selectmen did make the decision to begin closing that gap a little bit. And I certainly ask you to consider strongly, and the reason I ask, because I'm a taxpayer also, and a residential taxpayer. So that decision I'm recommending increases my taxes more than other options might. But I would like to give you a perspective, and you can share this well, Paul. It's from the Master Plan Update Steering Committee and the various meetings that we've had over the time with folks. We've developed some burning questions that'll be on the December 7th public forum for folks to consider when they meet at the middle school next week. And what it was to encourage a local economy that includes a variety of businesses, increases the tax base, provides local jobs, and results in more goods and services available to residents. And the reason it's phrased that way is because as we've received input from folks, that's been a general trend. And the question that comes out of that, should the town have, should the town have zoning and other incentives that would allow older, vacant, or underused industrial space to be developed for mixed uses, including uses for business uses and some housing? So the point of that question is how do we encourage more businesses and increase the base and not the rate? Certainly the point has done a great job at increasing the base, but then we've had others come in, IBM came in, we've sort of right to give them a TIF. Even most recently we saw to provide another TIF. I was certainly party to one of the TIFs when we did potpourri, so I'm not advocating against TIFs. But some of the larger organizations, because they did bring tax revenue, we saw that as a good deal. Steve put up on the board those small businesses between, would you say, 50,000 and 2 million, did I remember that correctly? So those are many of the businesses, and you mentioned Sherry Gould's office complex as an example, and there's many other examples along the road. So how do we help those folks also as we go through this process? And I'd offer this, at our most recent town meeting, the residents in overwhelming majority, super majority as a matter of fact, voted to spend more money. We wanted to buy things. So we as residents said we'd like to go out and purchase. It becomes, I think, incumbent upon us also, if we decide we want to purchase, that we pay also. And to spread the burden on to others so that we don't have to pay as much for what we would request to do. I just don't find that on the right side. So thank you for listening.
Thanks.
One comment to that, and based on, businesses, recent businesses coming into town, it's been asked, we asked right straight out, are you coming to town? Yes. It's not because of the tax rate why they're not coming to town. It's not because of the tax rate, they're not coming to town. I think that Littleton has a lot to offer beyond taxes, beyond breaks, beyond TIFs. And I think we're seeing that trend now with folks, the Potpourri Group, even Patriot Beverages, Sam Park. It's a community, I think, that businesses are thriving. I think that with town meeting taking up the fact that we need to do something with our downtown, with sewering, to better those folks, those small businesses you speak of downtown, is going to be tremendous, not only to the business community, but also to the community at large. So I understand what you're saying, but, I think that Littleton has a lot to offer for any business coming in.
I think that's true too, but in the same light, you have a lot of small businesses, mom and pop organizations that rent off somebody else or own a small building themselves, and it's a burden sometimes for those businesses to stay open. So we've had this tremendous split that Mr. Vella talked about. I think we should, I'm not saying go to a single rate, but I still think we should barely bring it down. So you have those people that are out there. If not everyone is potpourri, not everyone is the point. There are small buildings, they have small buildings that, it's.
And I asked this last year, is there a way to take care of small businesses?
No distinction in the code, right? No. Can I just make 2 points? I applaud you for putting the issue, Paul, squarely on the table as it should be in the terms, and I just would point out two things. One is a little bit to echo and follow up on what Jim said in terms of tax rate and its role in our economic development projections. Everything we have in terms of anecdotal data, but even more scientific than that, our EdSat study tells us repeatedly that tax rates in Littleton are not a factor. There are a lot of reasons businesses don't come here. Tax rates is not one of them. They have amenity issues. They have issues with outdated buildings that need to be renovated. There's permit process issues, whatever. But we have not have any indication that people have stayed away from town. Businesses have stayed away from town for tax reasons, and we've taken some proactive steps to actually go out and attract them. And I have not always supported the TIF policies, but I mean that shows a willingness on the board's part and the town's part to to use that tool when it's appropriate. Beyond that, I make no apologies. I don't care whether they're voters or not, but the residents, when they speak to people who are running for office, pretty often bring up the fact that they would like residential tax relief. So I make no apology for making an effort to grant them that, especially since, in my estimation, and a lot of people have made this observation before, property taxes are not inherently fair. They don't reflect an income ability to pay. It's based on your valuation of your property. Businesses have this is a personal philosophical opinion on my part, they at least have the opportunity to, generate sales and pay their bills, but two people sitting in houses next to each other that are valued exactly the same might be a retiree on a small income next to somebody who's making, a pretty hefty income, and that's, I'm sensitive to that distinction, and anytime we can use the, tax classification process to achieve some relief there, it's fine with me.
I already knew that was your position.
Yeah, I know, but.
Articulating it.
Mr. Sanders, I'm going to go to you in one second. I just want to make sure that your original question was why? Why did we go to a split rate? There's 110 communities of 351 in the Commonwealth that do have a split rate, and the initial purpose was because residential property values back in the late 80s.
Back in the day, yeah.
Yeah,
It was 64.
began to grow at a larger rate.
Yeah, and now it's 80-20.
Right. So that was the initial, to relieve some of the burden on the residents, and I think that,
Yeah.
everybody's made good points tonight, and will help us to make a decision, but that, to answer your initial question, I hope that provided some insight. And Keith, you had.
Yeah,
along
I
that same
just
line?
wanted to show the information that we were talking about, and that is what was the historic split. And if you go back to the first year, fiscal '88, fiscal '89 rather, when you first split the tax rate, you had the residential share was 63, so that the 63% of the value was residential, and so that the balance, 37% was commercial, industrial. And if you look now, that the split is where, you've gone from the residential values in close to 60%, now it's closer to 80%. So if you talk about what are the ways that affect the residential tax bill, one way would be to increase the commercial tax base, which is what we're talking about. But if you can't do that fast enough to, compared with, and you see all of the residential increases in value, then the only relief mechanism you have is to look at shifting. And that's why, the board, I think, has thoughtfully done that each year to see what is the impact on the property taxpayers, mindful as well of what's the impact going to be on that average industrial property as well.
Thank you. Mr. Sanders, you've been patiently waiting.
Yeah, sure.
sorry,
My
James.
name's James Kennedy. I live at 50 Gilson Road. I'm a resident. I don't own commercial property, but I'm a business owner in town. And And I did want to say that, you know, I've done some research a little bit on the topic and went to the Boston Business Show, just trying to get an idea. Is this statewide? Does every town do this? Is this like a norm, so you could shift the burden to the commercial property owners? And actually, only about 109 out of all the towns, municipalities, actually take advantage of this and shift the burden onto the commercial base. And in fact, there's a few that have done the flip. Now, whether that's for economic development reasons or whatever it might be, but and I'm not advocating this in Littleton, although there are probably a lot of people who would like that, but to make it easier for businesses to actually do business in town, to grow that job base that residents can get new jobs in town. And economic development is certainly something that you as selectmen might want to advocate for. And so that's just something to think about. I'll bring those numbers at the next meeting if anybody would like to see them.
Mr. Sanders.
George Sanders, 672 Great Road. I'm not a businessman here in the town, but I will say this here. I think one of the things that we have to be concerned about is the makeup of the population that we have in this town, which we have a lot of seniors in this town, and a lot of seniors have run into the problem of wanting to sell their homes and move out of the town of Littleton. And some of them been here many years. Some grew up in this town. And I think that if we look at the tax rate we're paying for FY16 as a resident, I think we're paying, what, 17 something? And if I heard correctly here, if you went to the single rate, and of course the commercial, they would love for you to go to the single rate, because that means everybody paying the same thing. And like Paul said earlier up here, that, you know, he's not making an excuse for why he catered to the side of residential. And the reason being is that as a business, normally a business will not do business downtown because of taxes. That is not the reason that they don't do business in town. First of all, you got to look at the economic development that is on the march in this town, is to limit certain growth that is going to take place in the commercial and industrial area of this town. So by that being a factor to play into it, then we have business in here that are only going to come in and do certain business in this town. And as far as the small business, you got small business in every community, and they're not really suffering at the hands of residential shift. I don't think the residential, at least for myself, I don't think residential is looking for every time is to shift the burden over to the commercial and industrial side every time to give us a lower rate, because that's going to run out. And when it runs out, it's going to shift the other way. So what I think people are looking for is to be fair with the residents and the commercial and the industrial in any community here, and paying a share with a small increase or based on growth. You know, if we got a good year, sometimes we can't do everything that we want to do because the growth just isn't there. So that means that it gets a little tighter for the people to make the decision there. But I think as far as the tax situation goes, I think Littleton is in a good position based on growth here. I think the presentation here was very good in terms of what we can do. And I think with residents understanding that, you know, there's a little growth here, and we're going to be able to give a little bit to everybody here. I think that is the way that I see as a resident, that I would encourage the resident to never go to the one tax rate, the single tax rate, because if you mention what we are paying now at FY16, and you went to a single rate, it jumps to $20. That's $3. typically almost $3 increase if you went to the single rate for 17. So that impact is a reduction for the business and commercial, but it is a hard pain that sucks right into the pockets of the resident if you went with that, because that wouldn't be fair to us. You got to get a long ways down the road before you can come up and put it in. Long community, a lot more wealthy than Littleton is. So you have different, you take like Harbor over there, you take my friend Mayor Massarelli, which is in Leominster down there. He went in, he gave tax rate to the city there. He went as much as 50 cents per thousand. So, you know, he did it several years that he's reduced the tax rate in Leominster down there. But it was all based on the growth that was taking place in Leominster and the way they was doing things. And nobody really spoke about, as far as the commercial and the industrial end, they didn't gripe about that, giving that rate to that. So I think that when we look at this picture here with Littleton, we need to stay fair-minded when we're dealing with what we're going to charge the people. And you know, I understand the business would like to get all they can, because I'll make this statement. Somebody once asked Rockefeller what would make him happy, and he said a little bit more. So, you know, businesses here is definitely looking for as much money that they can save when it comes to paying taxes. And I think that we shouldn't go to a single rate. And I say to those citizens out here that listen to this night, if it come up to a vote, you vote down the single rate.
Thank you. All right, I appreciate the input from everybody, and certainly the mic's still open, so if anybody else has anything. But I don't know that, hang on a second, Erica. I think we're a long way away from going to a single rate. I'll speak for myself. But I appreciate your passion around that. Erica?
Just a question. So I agree that if we were to increase the residential, the burden on the seniors in particular would be tough. There was talk at one of the meetings a month or so ago about a relief plan for seniors. Is that still in the works? Where are we with that? And also, I'm just curious how our rates compared to some of the surrounding towns.
Okay, so the only rate that I can quote, and I can call upon the professionals, Ayer's residential rate is $14.62 and commercial rate is $29.97. It's the only one that I have off the top of my head. It's not off the top of my head, it's off my notes from the other night. But hang on one second. As far as the relief, I think you're referencing the Sudbury plan. Keith, I think we had mentioned that, like in August, we were kind of kicking that around a little bit.
Yeah, it's on your list of goals to review this year. The way the Sudbury plan works is that all the other residential property taxpayers their tax burden would go up. The Sudbury funds the low-income seniors by shifting that burden, by not eliminating that burden, but rather shifting it to all the other residential property taxpayers. And we haven't made the decision yet that that's what we want to do here. But it would require, it is something that's being looked at. There are some other potential tax break mechanisms. Nothing we can do on our own. Everything would have to be, proposed at town meeting and brought to the state for approval. But
I would just caution, comparing rate to rate across towns.
Absolutely.
You really need to look at the average tax bill, because the rate's just a mathematical number between what's appropriated
How do you get to what you need to get to?
your valuation.
Yeah.
You really need to compare and that data we can get.
Mr. Vella.
Excellent segue, Bonnie, thank you.
CRT done for you?
Of Littleton and the 5 surrounding towns of Acton, Ayer, Foxborough, Groton, and Westford, only Ayer has a lower residential average tax bill than we do. So the other surrounding towns, their residential, the average residential tax bill is higher than Littleton's. That's FY16 information, and I don't know that it would have changed that dramatically going into FY17. I don't remember the exact figures to the dollars right now, but I did do that comparison as we were preparing last year for this very classification meeting. And if I may expand on what Selectman Glavy was speaking of, on reasons a business may or may not come to a particular locale, he's correct, taxes is not the number one. Usually it's permitting is the number one reason that causes heartburn to businesses as to they try to relocate or expand upon. Taxes, depending on whose survey you want to look at, is second or third in most instances, and it's really not number one. But I'm not really advocating so much that it's to bring more business in, certainly that may be a collateral benefit. But George said it very well about fairness. And I'll revert back to our November town meeting where we as residents decided to make purchases. And anytime we go make a purchase, we're obligated to pay for it. And asking someone else to pay for it because it was a little bit more expensive than I choose to pay for it this time, but I still want to purchase it. But Mr. Glavy, why don't you help me pay for the new lawnmower I want to buy for my yard? So in that way of fairness too, I understand exactly how you articulated, the two houses, similar value, but different circumstances of the residents in those side-by-side houses. I do understand what you're saying there. And we often talk about Littleton, not being a wealthy town, and certainly we're not anywhere near the wealthiest town in the state of Massachusetts. But again, when we look at averages across the board, and we look at household income, we're in the top quintile in the state of Massachusetts. We're not Weston, got that, but we're not many other towns, like 80% of the towns in the state of Massachusetts, whose average household income is less than ours. So we've chosen to make some purchases. I think, frankly, we have a moral responsibility to pay for our purchases. And that's the crux of my argument, not whether it should be another dollar this way or that way, because I like the businessman more than I like the resident. That's not it. So hopefully I was able to articulate that well enough for you to understand how I'm thinking on this.
For my part, I think you did, but it's essentially a philosophical issue as you present it. One way or the other, we're going to pay for those purchases. It's a question of who's paying for it.
Yes.
And I'm fine, personally, with the system that the law provides and has for 30 years where we, get to shift that rate within parameters, set parameters, and we've done that consciously to benefit residents with a residual increase for commercial industrial, and then over time what's historically been done once that shift was established is more or less to kind of tread water or to stay away from the fringes once that relief was put in place. So is it a legitimate argument you make? Of course it is, but I just don't agree with it personally.
Mr. Kennedy.
Sure. I'd like to speak for the business community at this point. I'm president of the business community. And I just want to say that our members, we don't want a single rate today. We don't expect you guys to just drop the rate and make the shift equal. We realize that would be a financial burden to the residents of the town. What most of us would like to see is just a gradual reduction in the commercial property tax rate. Gradually reduce the shift as our economy in the town grows, and we find that with more revenue and more income that we come closer to sharing the burden fairly and equally. And that's pretty much sums up what the business community has indicated to me. And business owners are not all wealthy Rockefellers in this town, okay? And a lot of them are senior citizens. So I know a lot of people saying, well, let's give relief to senior citizens. There are senior citizens who own commercial property, and it's a fixed income. And they're making money on the rent, that's their retirement. And so there are these people who are living on a fixed income, and they'll lose a tenant, and they're still paying taxes, and their tax rate's higher than residents. So, I mean, that's the reality of it. Not every business owner is wealthy. And actually, over the years, I've done a lot of work for a lot of businesses, B2B business, And I've seen a lot of them would say, geez, I got 10 employees, or I got 20 employees. I've been busting my butt. And my income from the business has stayed the same. I feel like I'm working just to pay my employees and keep the business going. So not all business owners are rich, wealthy, established companies. There's a lot of people just like you and me, that's their salary, that's their income for their family. And residents, you're like, every resident is a business owner in a sense. You work for yourself. Okay, you go out there, you work for an employee or employer, and that salary is your income. So you're your revenue, just as if you were a business owner. So that's it, thank you.
Sure. James, I just ask you to keep in mind a bigger picture. You and I just we're partners with a number of other folks in a very successful venture at town meeting to get the townspeople to take a great step forward on something that will increase business opportunities, specifically in the common area, but residually throughout the town, and that's with the common sewering. Let's not look at this in a vacuum, that taxes, tax rates for business property is the only issue or a punitive issue. If we're focused on growth, economic growth, that not only increases the value of those commercial properties, but increases services that people want, I mean, everybody benefits. So, this is one issue, but it's not the whole game as far as what's the town's position towards economic development and tax policy. I think the two notions of having residential tax relief and promoting proactively economic development through measures such as the sewering are not only compatible, they're absolutely essential for the town. So I just find it unnecessary personally that we should have to look at it as a black and white. You're either for or against, and taxes is the cutting edge issue on it. Let's work together to grow the tax base.
Can I? Okay.
Go ahead, you can then respond.
I just want to respond to that. So thank you. The business community also want to thank you for your hard work and supporting the common and the town and the economic development of the common. And I think the sewer is just going to be incredible for growing our local economy, growing our tax base. And that money could be used for wonderful things. When we grow our tax base and get the increase of $2 more million in revenue, we could do senior centers, we could do sports plexes. Hey, for myself, I'm a resident, I would love to see a beautiful community center where we could have a nice swimming pool. So I'm with you on that. I think we have a lot of common ground. We work together on a lot of things. And there's a lot on your plate as a selectman. You have a lot of things that you're spending money on. So personally, I think this is not speaking from the business community, because business owners have their agenda, I have my own. I would like to see you keep the rate, the split the same, given the demand that you have on the town financially. And I think that personally, that's the most financial sound way to go. Keep relief on some of those small business owners. Don't overtax them, overburden them. And I'm talking about the ones away from the point. The people at the point and PepsiCo, they're getting their TIFs, they're gonna be fine. I'm talking about your small business owners. So keeping the rate the same means that you're not gonna overburden them. Thank you.
If I can. Absolutely. I just add on to what Mr. Kennedy said, we're in contact a lot with the business community. And I think the business community that we deal with is very much aware of the tax split. They're not looking for a single rate at all. I think what they're asking is that please leave it the same or give us a tiny bit of relief. That's it. They're not expecting us to drop it tremendously. On the other hand, they're saying, please don't let it climb up again.
Good point, Joe. Thank you. Mr. Sanders.
Yeah, I think that
as a resident taxpayer here, I think one of the things that we have to be concerned about is the fact that the citizens in this town, I think from my experience, that they go the extra distance, I think, in helping our business in this town. I think that when matters come before the town, I think with good information that comes forth, they are encouraged to support the needs of the community as a whole. And I think that is a good thing for the commercial side of the house there, because all communities are not like that. And I think Littleton is a little bit of an exception to that fact, that they tried to do good from my standpoint, from where I stand at, for everybody in the community. But at the same token, a lot of time our officials don't really hear about everything that goes on, because I can tell you that numerous of people was really torn last year because we had 2 officials that was on the board that voted a shift, and that shift created some heartburn among a lot of people. And I'm just telling you like it is, because I like to speak it like it is. And I tell you that people get over things, and we have the right to agree to disagree. And in doing so, we must keep the eye on the ball. And we need to ensure that what we do is that we try to not shift the burden over onto the commercial side just for the sake because we can do it. I don't think any resident wants to do that, because later on, you're going to pay the burden for making those shifts over there. So I think what we need to try to do is to try to respect the fact that you have a difficult job to do in setting the rate. And in setting the rate, you got to take a lot of things into consideration, and you must represent everybody at the same token. So what Mr. Avella is talking about, you need to take that in consideration as well as you take everybody else in consideration. But the bottom line is going to be, you are not going to make everybody happy. So, in saying that, the thing that we can do is try to collaborate and work together and make Littleton better each and every time we go forward with projects, because we got stuff that we are putting in place. Another thing that the business needs to be concerned about, that is the resources that Littleton has. You got the cheapest electric rate probably in the state. You got water rates that are fantastic that's here. And hopefully the sewer thing goes through, and you'll have good rates on the sewer. And not only that, you will have the opportunity with that sewer system, if it goes through, to generate revenue on the other side. So I think there are a lot of things that, you know, in the horizon here that is going to benefit the commercial and industrial people as well as the resident as a whole.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else looking to be heard? All right. Other comments from the board?
Look forward to Monday.
Yeah, so we will be having continuation of this discussion on Monday evening during our Board of Selectmen meeting. We will be taking a vote to establish the tax classification. And by all means, you're all welcome, as always.
Folks have 4 days to
Digest it
stock
and
us
take a look
down
at
at the grocery store or the transfer station or wherever else they want. And, yeah,
This is true.
it's good. Yeah.
So thank you all for coming out. Thank you all for listening in. And again, our meeting is Monday the 7th? 5th.
Meeting's at 6:30, the hearing on classification is at 7:15.
And just before we adjourn, I just wanted to take a moment to offer condolences from the Board of Selectmen and from the town to Paul Glavy, whose mom passed away this week. So just,
A great woman.
Yeah, thank you, and the outpouring from the community and the folks here have been very much appreciated by my family and myself. Thank you.
so thoughts and prayers are with you and your family. Thanks. So,
Make a motion to adjourn.
motion,
Sorry.
it's been seconded.
I was checking on the medical.
You can go, there's a planning board meeting on Cooper Farm.
Medical issue, that's what it was.
We good?
You can have too much of a good thing, you know?
All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you very much. See you on Monday.